had a very safe and blessed weekend, an enjoyable one, hopefully. Now, just late last week, a release actually came out from a very, very important department of the state. And I speak to the statistics department, the Central Statistical Office, as it also is known as. And that is a report which has been long awaited, one would say, the provisional results of the St. Lucia Population and Housing Census 2022. And of course, we are in 2024, and the last census prior to that census, which we're now afforded the opportunity to actually look at some of the data from, actually occurred back in 2010. So, although normally censuses are done in most countries at this point in time about every 10 years, that has been the norm in most places around the world, certainly the norm in St. Lucia as well. If we look at the census data from previous years, it would roughly fall about 9 or 10 years spread between the dates. And so, of course, we would have had a 1980 census, a 1970 census, 1960 census. There was one in, I think, 1990 or 1991 or thereabouts. And of course 2010. And it gives a really important snapshot, if you like, of the country, not just really of the demographics of the country, the size of the population, the breakdown of the population, using a number of different classifications, but as well, of course, the effective structure of households, and how people live within those households, what is impacting them, what they have, what are their possessions, what are the relationships between people in households. So it really is a very, very extensive uh, undertaking, which most countries do every decade. Of course, in this instance, as I mentioned, we're now in 2024, in August of 2024. And you would hear, of course, this was supposed to be a 2022 census. In fact, the census really was supposed to have happened in 2020. And we do know, of course, the great disturbance of COVID 19 and that pandemic and the impact that it actually had on so many different things, including the matter of the census actually occurring when it was actually supposed to have occurred. So, of course, it got delayed. It didn't happen in 2021. And truth be told, it didn't really happen either in 2022 either. And so really much of the effort of the census was actually done within the year 2023, although it was still known as 2022 census. And the census date is usually a particular physical date that is used as a baseline date, which was actually still the 12th or 13th, I think, of the night of the 12th to the 13th of March 2022. The previous census, I think, was May of 2010. That was the date that was used, May 10th of 2010. And that snapshot, of course, is a very, very important tool in assessing where the country is at in respect to many, many different economic and social trends. And so this is really one of the most important documents that will be published for some time in terms of being able to set the data sets for very, very many important issues, which will then guide and drive um, how government acts, but also how the private sector potentially will act as well, and of course how multilateral agencies, how uh, banks, development banks, and financial institutions look at how things are going. So the census information, the demographics of any country are really important from a financial perspective, from a planning perspective, financial planning perspective, to look and see what the trends are and how things are going. So this report, as I said, has been long in coming. In fact, the entire census generally is supposed to take about 6 months. And this particular census, this 2022 census, in addition to actually starting way after the actual date it was supposed to, in fact, dragged on for a pretty long time and experience, as we are told, lots of issues in terms of how the enumeration surveys were dealt with, the actually getting individuals to provide information, even getting to people's homes are sometimes, as you can well imagine, a significant challenge. People are usually, of course, want their homes to be very private places, and they want to and desire to protect their homes. They don't like people to come by in many instances. And so, whether it may be high walls and dogs in the yard, other things that people just simply not coming in to answer the somebody at the door, it is a real issue and factor, which, of course, the individuals who were actually undertaking this enumeration exercise would have, in fact, experienced. And it appears that, in fact, there were, in fact, significant challenges with respect to this census. In fact, it has been put down as an issue of undercounting of the population. Now, of course, statisticians have ways of dealing with the fact that you will never ever be able to get 100% of the population. The mere fact that you're actually undertaking a survey and it's taking time, as the time goes on, the data is changing, right? People are moving, people are shifting around, people are dying, people are being born, and so there's a lot um, of shifts that happen. It's a very dynamic situation, and yet still, of course, you want to get this snapshot to give you an idea of where things are at. And that, of course, um, is generally dealt with by some level of approximation, that you do estimates based on how many you've actually collected. You extrapolate effectively, right? You extrapolate the data to be able to provide a reasonable estimation based on some sort of baseline information that may have already been collected. So, for instance, it may be that you know the total number of buildings. That is a known thing, which you probably could calculate on the basis of geographical information. But then, as to who is actually in those buildings, which you actually now have to go on the ground and see what is going on in those buildings, it's more than just looking at a satellite image, but actually interacting with people and collecting data. That's another task. And as, of course, we mentioned, not everybody wants to be able to respond. So it actually is quite a lot of information, albeit um, there is that caveat which has been put forward within this report to make the point that it is a provisional release. In effect, there is still work ongoing looking at the data that has been collected and going through that data and trying to see and make sense of it all, really. But the provisional report is still a very, very interesting document nonetheless. It is 149 pages, and I just want to quickly share with you the introduction, which gives some context as to what occurred and the methodology and where we are at, especially in terms of our population. So, on page 12 of that report, the introduction reads as follows. The results presented in this report were obtained from an analysis of the data collected during St. Lucia's 2022 Population and Housing Census after a period of intensive data cleaning and consistency checking. This work is ongoing, which means that the figures therein are subject to review and may approximate the final census statistics. The Central Statistical Office, CSO, will continue to add relevant tables and other forms of information dissemination as the census dataset is analyzed further in conformity with prescribed regional and international recommendations for the release of a more detailed set of results. Additionally, the comparison made between the 2022 and previous censuses may be affected by definitional and other analytical variations. Therefore, users of this information should scrutinize the related tables with some degree of caution. The differences in definition between terms such as household population and total population may also be considered. Note that the household population is the sum of all people recorded on visitation records and or electronic census questionnaires on which a set of geographically dependent weight factors has been applied to arrive at estimated full values. The total population is the household population plus an estimate of long-time residents who at census night 12 to 13th March 2022 had their residence in institutions for collective living such as hospitals, hotels, and correctional institutions. The household enumeration encountered challenges of undercounting due to reasons like non-cooperation from respondents. To estimate undercounts, some countries use post-enumeration surveys, but this method proved too resource-intensive for a small nation-state like St. Lucia. For the 2022 St. Lucia census, the department's mapping and listing operations achieved better coverage of households when compared to the actual house count. These operations uncovered significant discrepancies in the reported number of inhabited buildings, dwellings, and households. This undercount varied across geographical regions, leading to the application of weighted factors to adjust population and housing statistics. The provisional 2022 census results show St. Lucia's resident population increased to 172,948 from 166,526 in 2010, representing a 3.9% increase with an overall density of 721 people per square mile. This increase in population contrasts sharply with the mid-year population estimates of 182,289 for 2022. The aggregate is derived by factoring in births, deaths, and migration data to the previous year's estimate. The age dependency ratio declined from 48.6 in 2010 to 44.5 in 2022. The sex ratio decreased from 97.2 from 101.5. Health concerns include a high prevalence of diabetes and hypertension. Geographic distribution trends reveal Castries remains the most populated district, despite a decline observed for the census count, while Grosley, Vieux-Fort, Labrie, and Choiseul saw significant growth. Household size has decreased over time, and educational attainment shows a sizable portion of the population lacks formal education. Crime statistics indicate theft as the most common offense, and the population pyramids illustrate a youthful demographic. Census 2022 can be described as a de jure census. People were enumerated at their usual place of residence during census night, which means that absent household members were included in the enumeration exercise. And that is the introduction to this year's census. And of course, coming very quick and very straight out into, in fact, indicate that it has to be looked at with a degree of caution. And in particular, even comparing information from previous years also needs to be looked at with a degree of caution as well. The point being made about undercounting is a very interesting one. And there is, in fact, in the next section, there's a full section that deals with what is called the weighting process, which was used to effectively tackle and to sort of come over the issue or overcome the issue of undercounting. And effectively, they were not able to actually go out and perhaps get to the actual number of people that they expected to get. But even so, they then use a weighting process to be able to compensate for the set of people who were never actually met or never actually submitted or actually were able to be interviewed during that enumeration process. As I said, there's a section that goes into this, which we're not going to actually go through, but it actually does not give an actual breakdown of the number of enumerated people, i.e., the number of people who were actually counted within the enumeration exercise. I'm not sure if that was an omission or whether, in fact, it is something that was deliberate, but it actually does not provide that information. And so, what is provided, however, is basically an indication of how much there was an estimate of the apparent undercount as it was put forward. And from what they're saying, it was somewhere in the region of about 22.3% of households were in fact not enumerated. And that varied across the various constituencies. So, for instance, the lowest apparent undercount was in the case of ancillary, where they estimated that to be about 9.7%. So, roughly 10% of the households they believe that existed were not, in fact, actually captured within the enumeration exercise. But it actually goes up pretty high in the case of Castries, for instance, and Grosley, which are the most populous districts. 1 in 4 households in Castries, according to the Central Statistical Office, were in fact not included or not enumerated, and so therefore they have a 25.2% undercount estimate. In the case of Grosley, an 18.8% undercount. And in the case of the highest, in fact, are in Micoud and Labrie, where they are 30.9% and 33.7% respectively. So to tackle this matter, what was then used, I believe, was this weight factor. So based on this variation in the actual numbers counted, They then, based on the number of households that were actually enumerated, they factored up, they weighted up the whole island to compensate for this situation. So as of now, I believe, based on that, the estimated population is 171,834. There's a note under this section that I think is useful to give some context and some of the other metrics that were being used. And one of them was that of Lucelec electricity supply. And it says as follows: considering that a sizable proportion of households are domestic consumers of electricity supplied by Lucelec, information from the company may be used to assess the validity of the estimates in Table 1. So, in other words, they use the Lucelec data as a means of verification or corroborating the estimation which they came up with using a separate method. So they looked at two separate methods, the actual strict one of using the weighting based on the increases there, and then to look at the Lucelec data and then to estimate. Lucelec reported that the number of domestic electricity consumers increased from 53,566 in December 2010, which was a previous census year, to 63,222 in 2021 and 63,849 at the close of 2022. According to the 2022 census data, the percentage of households using electricity for lighting and domestic use was 94.1%. An interpolation of the Lucelec data for the 63,350 domestic consumers at the time of the 2022 census, keeping the constant at 94.1% for all private households, the total number of households is calculated to be 67,322. Considering that there were more households with multiple electricity accounts than households that share a single account, the number of domestic consumers' accounts is relatively close to the estimates in Table 1 and therefore validates the housing data for Census 2022. And so basically, as I was saying, based on the Lucelec estimate, it was 67,322 households in 2022. And the estimate that the census came up with after the weighting factor was looked at was 65,951. So about 66,000 from the census and 67,000 from the Lucelec data. And so they basically said that there are some instances where you actually have households with more than one electricity connection. That's more common than actually having household sharing. And so therefore, that is a pretty close estimate to the actual total number of households. And so that was one methodology of verification that was used by the Census Department. There's lots to unpack, and very, very importantly, this is a conversation that we do have to have. If this data is, in fact, as is being suggested, is pretty accurate, 172,948 persons in St. Lucia, it really does mean that the population over a period of 12 years only shifted up by about 7,000 people over a period of 12 years. And that, of course, is a pretty dire situation if one certainly exists. In fact, based on what in fact, it's a little less than that. It's 6,422. And as I said, if you look at it over that 12-year span, effectively, what we're saying is on average, the population in St. Lucia only increased by about 535 persons per year. And of course, it's not a smooth average like that, and we'd have to look at the precise perhaps indication of what it was year on year, every single year. But on average, that was the increase. Now, that is, of course, pretty concerning because there was a time when St. Lucia would have likely been seeing about 4,000 births in a year back in the 1980s. And it would have probably been seeing less than 1,000 deaths in a year, which would have meant that the natural increase in the population at that time was somewhere perhaps in the region of about 3,000, 3,500 or so births, or 3,500 persons increase, right? Because if you net the births from and the deaths. And in this current situation, uh, this is a very, very, very concerning figure because it somewhat is pretty much suggesting that we are quite likely, in my opinion, facing a bit of a population crisis if, in fact, this is the extent of the population to date and the increase in the population over that period. But we'll speak about that in just a bit more because we actually are due for our weather report. So that's our dish of the day.
This has been the Daily Dish.
One tells for your home, I see. Bathroom, kitchen, pantry. Need tells for your balcony. Come down to Tells Plus satisfaction guarantee. Tells Plus, Tells Plus, Tells Plus. Big tells with unbeatable cost. Customer service, A plus. Did all kind of tells. Come down to Tells Plus. We also got gas and vanity. Books, doors, you'll see. Come down to my nobody. We got the best tells on island. Trust me. We are located Land Street in Castries, Bosses Grocery Lanes, and Flag Street in Beaufort. Telephone number 453-7939.
Girl, I've been so stressed searching for the perfect tiles to complete my home.
Really?
Yeah, it's always the same white, beige, and gray tiles with the tile stores. Like they're all buying from the same place. You're the design expert. Help me, please. I'm fed up.
What are you looking for?
Something different. Something that says Caribbean beauty and suits my personality. Something vibrant and classy with a little razzle dazzle.
Okay, Ms. Razzle Dazzle, I know just the place. Island Style Tile and Bath, they're my number one store for everything tile. And with their new In Living Color collection, you'll find the most gorgeous styles to give you that splash of Caribbean flair you're looking for.
That sounds perfect.
I'll even take you myself and throw in a free design consultation.
I'll never say no to that, sis. I can't afford you anyway.
Visit our Island Style showrooms in Castries, Rodney Bay, and Beaufort, or call 450-452 or 453 Tile. We'll help bring your vision to life in living color.
This is Radio Caribbean International. It's now time for the weather news.
And that's all, of course, on the 1.1. It's now time for your weather report as of 12 noon today, presented by Island Style Talent Bar. The forecast for St. Lucia Valley for the next 24 hours. Winds will be blowing from between the east and northeast near 18 miles per hour or 30 kilometers per hour. The weather fair to partly cloudy and hazy for a few isolated showers. The forecast for the Los Angeles fair to occasionally cloudy and hazy for a few light showers, mainly over the southern Windward Islands. And the tropical weather outlook, the Atlantic high pressure system will generate light to moderate easterly winds over the eastern Caribbean region during the next 24 hours. Weak and stable conditions will continue to cause a few cloudy periods with showers over the southern portion of the region during the first half of the forecast period. A tropical wave located over the central tropical Atlantic is moving westward in near 17 miles per hour or 28 kilometers per hour. Tropical cyclone formation is not expected over the tropical Atlantic during the next 7 days. And this was the weather report as of 12 noon today, presented by Island Style Talent Bath.
This has been RCI's Weather News. For more information, call the Weather Hotline at 454-3452. RCI 101 number 1.
Girl, I've been so stressed searching for the perfect tiles to complete my home.
Really?
Yeah, it's always the same white, beige, and gray tiles with the style stores. Like they're all buying from the same place. You're the design expert. Help me, please. I'm fed up.
What are you looking for?
Something different. Something that says Caribbean beauty and suits my personality. Something vibrant and classy with a little razzle dazzle.
Okay, Ms. Razzle Dazzle, I know just the place. Island Style Tile and Bath, they're my number one store for everything tile. And with their new In Living Color collection, you'll find the most gorgeous styles to give you that splash of Caribbean flair you're looking for.
That sounds perfect.
I'll even take you myself and throw in a free design consultation.
I'll never say no to that, sis. I can't afford you anyway.
Visit our Island Style showrooms in Castries, Rodney Bay, and View Fort, or call 450-452 or 453 Tile. We'll help bring your vision to life in living color.
And welcome back to the lunchroom here at Radio Caribbean International. We've got about 21 minutes to go before the hour of 2 o'clock. And of course, the number to call in is 452-3046. Let's try to get in some calls at this time. Good afternoon and welcome to the lunchroom. What's on your plate today?
Good afternoon, Mr. George.
How are you doing, caller?
How are you doing?
Very good, thank you. And how was your weekend?
Everybody good?
Yes, thanks.
Yeah. I saw your dad on thing, man. Giving some very important observations. The book review, the Roseau Valley thing.
Ah, yes.
And making some top recommendations too as we go forward.
In fact, I think this Wednesday I'm going to have some guests coming in from that group, which actually
I
produced.
think more communities should be embark on these sort of projects.
Definitely.
Yeah, to give the first hand thing, instead of people coming from outside and and interviewing them and then writing books, let them, But one of the things that I said that I think, I don't know if St. Lucians, are aware enough of that, the work of that gentleman. That gentleman is he's right up there as a St. Lucian who has contributed tremendously to the development of his country. And I'm happy that your father found it worthy of special mention. I'm talking of Christopher Cox.
Yes.
Yeah, Christopher Cox.
Havana. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've known Mr. Cox for quite a while now. When he, in earlier stages, and I always found that he's a man with a vision. He always he looked to, he never rests on his laurels and be satisfied. And he always, and of course, the vision is being reflected in the fact that his I think his children are running the business or aspects of the business now. And in fact, I saw one of his daughters recently. I think she was doing a tour of the farm with the interviewer or whatever, and explaining all what they do and so on. And you see, when we have that generational sort of buy-in,
right?
That means that you must be doing something right. This is how legacy and brand and so on are established, colleagues.
Yes, definitely.
Well, I mean, your dad done brand new colleagues, George Jr. So it seems if you had to know to be a criminal, that's what it would be. Your colleague George Jr.
It seems so.
Hello.
Yes. I'm with you, caller.
We're happily that you turn out to be somebody who has a passion for knowledge and research and so on and so forth. And I mean, as explained in by your attempt to break down the numbers in the stats, which I feel, I don't know, what in some way, what would you say you really wanted, in one sentence, from all that information you think there, to the general public?
Well, I think the most important thing that we're facing right now is a serious population trajectory, serious risk that we're already facing a developed world crisis in terms of our population.
So you would say that's the underlying point.
And I think I
suspect,
yes.
All the data you're giving there.
Well, I gave a lot of it just to ensure that I was making the point of reporting what was put in there.
Because even one of the things you mentioned is about education. What they said about education.
They said there's a sizable proportion of the population that is still not formally educated. In fact, the percentage that they've placed it at was 32.5%, right, of the population, or about 56,000 people had no sort of formal education at all. Now, they didn't actually give, and it would be useful to get that, a breakdown of how that is spread across age, so as to see, in fact, if there has been an impact on more recently on the younger population. So is this something that is a factor of the older population that we're going to see, or is it something that is still occurring despite all the efforts of universal education, that we're still seeing that this is a big challenge? So I think that would be useful to actually get a breakdown of. And in terms of primary education, for instance, they had, the highest level of attainment for some people was primary education, at about 15.2% of the population.
But Calix,
it seems.
I think, all right, there's a situation when it comes to housing that we badly short of housing. You say that.
It appears that way. There is a data. I think it's the quality of housing too. That's the other issue that we have to look at.
Is that there are so many. I guess that's middle class areas. You would more find that. Not even middle class areas alone. Even in ghetto zones too. So many unoccupied buildings.
Yes.
Houses. It would be interesting to make a survey. Do that survey. And put that against the housing demand.
It's an interesting point that you're making, because
like Brother Bob said, in the abundance of water, the fool is thirsty. So there are so many houses, and we're short on housing. And the same thing with vehicles. We have so many vehicles, and we found wanting in our transportation. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I think we must really try and tie up.
I think some of that actually is coming out of
assets with the beneficiaries of the assets, of this country.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not happening. It's just like these things exist, on their own, like houses. You have a lot. Yeah, you have plenty houses abandoned, plenty vehicles that drive around with just one passenger.
Mm-hmm.
Yet still, people stranded on the road. They can't get there, And more vehicles come, and less effective the transportation system becomes. More buildings are being built. It's good for growth in terms of construction expenditure and so on and so forth. But then fewer people have homes. I don't know. I mean, you're the expert, Calix.
Okay. But I did take the point about the issue of the vehicles, and actually that is captured in the census, I think, on page 69, and they actually do have a breakdown there. And based on what they're saying, 38,000 of the 66,000 households on island, let's say about 39,000 of them do not have a vehicle. Right, so that's about nearly 60%. That actually they don't own vehicles. But then what you will then find is that you've got a fair number. You got 18,000, according to this report, that own at least one vehicle. Then you've got another 5,000 households which own two vehicles. Then 1,500 that own 3 to 5. So I'll have to work it out to see exactly how many vehicles this kind of works out to be, because as you're saying, we're seeing a lot of vehicles on the roads. We're hearing about a significant issue of congestion on the roads. But in terms, and of course, this is capturing household vehicles. It will not capture things like buses, I suppose. I'm not sure if how that would have been um, captured here, but there's a lot. There's a lot to look at.
Sensitized to mathematics, boy.
Sorry.
All them kind of things you're talking there, math. People have to be, have that kind of desire, that kind of, to tune the brain to all these things. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
How do we do that?
yes. It and that is
continually seeing what's going on. I think, let me tell you, if you're going to have a show, you're going to have a match, a political match, everything is well promoted. You're going to have a football game, whatever. You promote it. But who is promoting mathematics? We need to, think and create, let's do some more math quizzes.
Yeah.
And different thing, and it's not just the pedagogy, the teaching of the subject in a particular way will improve it. We have to infuse it in the society as the same way we'll tell people about music, and arts and culture, so important.
Yeah.
And we don't wait for these things to be taught in school, no?
Right.
So, but
it's a very important point that you're making, and we don't really have. And I know there was an effort at one point by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Cato Lorenzen, based over in the University of Connecticut, and I think he was recently honored. And one of the things he was hoping to push for is to
speak up. I'm not any.
One of the things he was hoping to push for was for the creation of an academy of sciences, of arts and sciences, something to that effect. Now, I'm not sure necessarily that would be the sum total of solving that, but I'm just saying that you need to actually have some of these institutions that would actually push this type of agenda. I think one of the areas, for instance, that you have the St. Lucia Teachers Union, and I know some associations, like the history teachers, I think, they formed a history teachers association. Now, it might be useful if there could be some sort of a grouping of math teachers who could then at least look at what the situation is and, in fact, do some of that work that you're talking about. How do you popularize the effort of teaching math, of becoming a more numerate society? It's on literacy. I think some of the banks, some financial institutions have been doing a little bit of the financial literacy, but I think
they're doing, the banks do the financial, they own that, they own that.
Yeah, but but having it ingrained.
They're not on the numbers, they own their thing.
Yeah.
To enhance their thing, but who the numbers to who is really, we we need to do more of that for math and English, inculcate, and because somehow the generations coming they don't really gravitate to it, and they don't find it sexy, so to speak.
Well, a shout out. Thanks for that contribution. Thanks very much for that. And in fact, I just want to make a shout out to a regular listener, Mr. Jomo Jean-Pierre. And he's always been that point. It is to measure is to know. To measure is to know. You don't really fully understand something if you are not measuring it, if you cannot give some sense of size or dimension or proportion. And so if we quite often hear, we have a problem, like we heard recently, we have a challenge with respect to the healthcare system, right? And you hear that. But how do we know whether we're coming or we're going? How do we know whether we are making strides, we're moving in the right direction, or we're not moving in the right direction? And that takes measurement. That takes active data collection, and it's sometimes people tell you that data collection is can sometimes be very tedious because you're trying to obtain information on the go. But the reality is that technology has changed so much. This is exactly why we seeing investments in things like health information systems and these various information systems, because it's about collecting the data. And of course, these are whole new exciting fields. They now term data analytics, where it's really important to see what is where, you know, whether we're moving forward or back, and by what in what direction, and at what rate. And so all these things, of course, are really really important if we are to really begin looking at some of the challenges that we actually have as a country, because the data is what is going to tell you whether there is improvement. Can everything be quantitative? Well, that's a big debate, and some people obviously talk about quality, and you some things are very difficult to measure, but we're finding very interesting metrics to look at lots of things that were thought to be purely qualitative before, that people are in fact finding ways of measuring these things today. Right. So, yeah, of course, it's important to do so. So I think the exercise of the census is a very serious one. It's a very important one. It certainly should not be a document that just simply stays maybe on a shelf, forgotten, as we've heard of so many different types of reports. And in fact, the other thing about it is that the data has to be available. So people, and I think there has been an efforts over the years by the statistics department to allow for individuals to actually go on and work with the data, and you know, run their own queries, you know, look at what's coming up, because what the census does is just it tries to capture some of the data. All right, but there's a lot of more stuff there in there that can be mined and could be analyzed to look at certain trends. So, for instance, as was mentioned, the census made a statement about education, and of course, when we actually go into the table itself, it gives you a breakdown for the entire island, and of course, that statement of about 33% of the population not having any sort of formal education um, might come as a pretty big shock for some of us, because we've known that for the past, since 2006, we've been speaking about universal secondary education. So is it that individuals, that the people who we're speaking about, this pretty large number, nearly a third of the population, where do they fall in terms of the age that they're dealing with? Now, is it that they're older individuals who uh, secondary education was not made available to them in the past, and so therefore they're still in the workforce? And if that is the case, and there's a recognition that, look, maybe there's a need to still do a lot more by way of continuing education or adult education, adult learning. So the role of institutions now, how they relate not just to the students who are 0 to 18, right, or 3 to 18, as it is now under the Education Act, the proposed education bill, but how do you move beyond that to now look at that 33%, if in fact those people might be in their 50s and 60s or 70s, whatever the case may be. One of the other very interesting bits of data that came out, and again, just to try to give some snapshots of various aspects here, was on the matter of employment. And quite recently, I think just last week, Friday, the government put out some data. Again, I would have been collected, I guess, through the census, sorry, the statistics department because they do regular surveys of the labor force. But that some of that data is also captured within the census, separate and apart from the quarterly surveys that the statistics department runs. And it seems to be pretty consistent with that recent figure coming out of the first quarter of 2024. Mind you, this data, of course, as I said, would not have been coming from strictly one quarter because the census was going over a pretty long period for collecting, but it did give some sense. And I think based on that, the unemployment rate in the census was about, I think, 10 or 11%. And I'm trying to find the exact table at the moment. But that was actually pretty close to exactly what was put out, I think, last week, Friday, by the government, indicating that the unemployment rate was, I think, about 11%. In the census, that data is 11.9% as the total unemployment rate. And it also gives breakdowns by region, by district. And so, in fact, the district with the lowest unemployment rate was Grosley with 9.3%. And the highest unemployment rate was actually that of the district of Canaries, 24.6%. The way the census works, they use some defined districts, and I'll just go through them very quickly. Castries, Ancillary, Canaries, Soufrière, Choiseul, Labrie, Vieux-Fort, Micoud, Dennery, and Grosley. Those are the defined areas there. Now, of course, you'd realize that they have a separation between ancillary and canaries, which is for census data collection purposes, statistical office purposes, although that division does not exist, say, on the basis of constituencies or for land administration. You just have the district or the quarter of ancillary. But in the case of the census, it's broken down into ancillary and canaries. And of course, canaries being the smallest district by way of population, it coming out and showing in fact, a pretty high localized unemployment rate of nearly 25% in the case of canaries. Ancillary, actually, when you look at that figure for ancillary, it's 12.7%. So which captures a much broader area. And so that gives an indication, of course, potentially that there's a significant challenge in terms of unemployment in the case of canaries. So certainly something to look at there. In the case of unemployment rate by age group, that's another interesting one. Although across the board, it's 11.9% unemployment in St. Lucia. And that figure, of course, has come down significantly. We would recall maybe about, maybe 10 years ago, we were probably talking about an unemployment rate of about 20%. It's now 11.9%. Could very well be that this is something to do, again, these shifts in demographics that we're seeing. Is it because of migration, a lot of other issues? But that's where it's at according to the census data. And when you look at the rate of unemployment by age group, it falls off under 10% for persons 35 and over. But then when you look at the ages of 15 to 19, the unemployment rate there is 49.5%, 15 to 19, right? And then 20 to 24, it falls to a quarter, 25%. Now, that 15 to 19 is an interesting one because one should argue that, in fact, a lot of these individuals probably should not even really be in the workforce as yet. They should be, in truth, in some form of skills program, training program, or education program between the ages of 15 to 19. And so again, planners looking at this should be thinking, well, okay, look at that. We've got a really, really high rate of unemployment in that 15 to 19 age group. That says a lot. That says that there is a need, certainly, to still tackle youth unemployment, which still remains pretty stubbornly high, and the need for skills development, the need for training in that age group. And to, in fact, just simply keep those individuals in school a couple of years more would actually bring down the unemployment rate. But we're going to have to continue that conversation sometime later in the week. We're over time here at the Lunchroom on Radio Caribbean International. Of course, thanks for joining us. And we do hope that you can come back tomorrow, God willing, for another program. I'm your host, Alex George Jr., saying goodbye.